quorum,
Yes.
because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 members, so we've got over half of the committee here. So we will start off with minutes. We're playing catch-up on minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I apologize. I do not have the minutes from those previous meetings. I will search through my
Okay.
up office to see if I can find those notes.
All right. And I'll talk to you afterwards, okay? So I caught us up on March yesterday, so. Last March, somehow we didn't submit minutes, so I submitted those. And also, we have November minutes that we have presented to us, so March 3rd and November 3rd. And Aaron, did you distribute? Oh,
She went to go print, I didn't print out copies of the March one, so I
okay,
believe she
so
went to print out
getting the March,
copies.
but.
I'll check and see what minutes I haven't made out of this.
Right, I don't know how many of them were yours, Kevin. I'll get you the
I
list.
know March probably was. That wasn't there.
No, you weren't there. Mr. King, welcome. Well, that's okay, we're just getting started. And we're waiting for Aaron Blair to come back down with the March minutes. All right. We do have the November 3rd minutes that were distributed. Has anybody looked those over and ready to?
Sure. I would move that we accept the November 3rd minutes as presented.
Second.
And there's a second by Bill. All those, any discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. I think we can move on to the election of officers and circle back to the minutes when Aaron reappears with those. So this would be our annual reorganization meeting, so to speak. We have 9 current members. The ones who are not here are Judy Corso, Mike Zuloff, and David Miller. And then
Blake Harris.
and Blake,
Blake's a representative.
yeah, he's the representative, so he's not.
Can't be an officer.
Right, he's not a voting member, but he's the liaison with the commission. So what would be the pleasure for officers?
I'll ask you if you're willing to serve again as president.
Sure.
Yay.
All right, there's one.
Willing to serve as secretary?
Yeah. Cool. And I believe, Bill, you were vice chair last year.
Vice chair.
Does anybody want to step up for anything, volunteer? Mark's got the deer in the headlights look.
That's normal.
That's normal, all right. Mr. King's quietly sitting off to the side, so.
I mean, the three.
Yeah.
Can I make a motion to nominate the people that were presented?
Oh, we have Mark as vice chair on here. I'm sorry. I stand
I have no
corrected.
problem with Bill doing it.
Okay.
So, as
Well,
presented.
does Bill have a problem with Bill doing it?
Second.
Okay.
Second his motion.
All right. So the slate would be me as chair, Bill as vice chair, Kevin as secretary.
Correct.
Okay. Any further nominations or corrections? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so I think before we move on, we need to have Ms. Blair back, so we will wait for her.
Somebody sing a song or something.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
For expedience purposes, I would recommend that we continue further. in
Okay.
the agenda.
All right.
And then come back to the.
Sure,
minutes when they
we
are-
can skip the Battery Park because that would be Aaron, correct? So we can talk about the charter amendment, and I asked that this be put on the agenda just as an information for the committee. I'm not sure how many of you are aware that there is a charter amendment.
I am.
Okay, and certainly, based on the wording in that, that would impact the influence of any recommendations that we would make to the commission, and the fact that, as I understand it, the general public could override any recommendation that we would make on a project to the city commission. So just wanted the committee to be aware of it. I don't know that there's any need to discuss it, but certainly welcome to. Any members have any questions or comments?
I have a question. Is there any reservation on the use of that property that was put in any gift that may have been made to the city in the past? I know property surrounding the courthouse, there's limits on what can be done there because of the gift. I'm not aware of any, and I just wondered if there was any.
You're talking about the Battery Park.
Battery Park property.
I'm not aware.
Yes, sir.
Sounds good.
That property is subject to a lease that was drafted in the mid-1980s with the Pfeiffer family group, and that was assigned to the Maroos group. And that's as much as I know about it.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
But that lease has been in place and has a life of its own for another 50 years or so, if I recall. So, all right. Okay, we're going to circle back to you, Aaron.
Sure.
All right. Well, now you will give the committee a chance to glance over the March minutes that were just presented. Back
Mr. Chair?
March 22. Yes.
I would move that we accept the minutes from March 22 as presented.
Okay. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
All right, Joe. All right, any discussion? If not, all in favor?
March 3rd.
March 3rd, yeah.
March 3rd, yeah. All opposed? Motion carries. All right, while you were absent, we took care of the officers. We took care of a brief discussion about the charter amendment, and we're now back to the Battery Park PUD.
Sure. So just a review of the proposed development for Battery Park is a mixed-use development on the site that is roughly north of the parking from the Justice Center, so from the tennis courts north, from Meg Street east. It doesn't, touch anything about the sailing club, and it includes the marina that's operating today. It's proposed as a planned unit development, which is a special zoning category that's created so you can make sure a mixed-use site is oriented in a good way for the public space, for the streetscapes, for the mix of buildings. It's a creative, kind of flexible zoning category, so you don't have to go and follow like one use by itself. You can think of the whole development all as one piece. For example, if you were developing in a different zoning district, you might look at each use isolated and its parking needs and how it would sit on its own, in its own site. Whereas at a mixed-use site like this, it's intended to be multi-story and kind of conglomerated, so you can create the development in such a way that it's more like a downtown experience where you have walkable public spaces and you can really concentrate on the open space, the park space. So I know that I've heard a lot of buzz in the community about the park itself. So the park in the proposed development is the same size as the park today. It actually has better access to the waterfront because it's a little more east slightly than some of the existing space. The overall green space that's proposed is larger than is existing, and the waterfront access is opened up a lot. It's got like a 40-foot boardwalk all the way around it. So the proposal, the site plan, as I've analyzed it, is very open and public space forward and in line with all of the previous concept plans, market studies, downtown plan, vision for that site. I wanted to just review the planned unit development zoning process. So a development like this is huge. It's complicated. It has a lot of moving parts. This is the planned unit development process is just about the physical space. It's about the site plan orientation. It doesn't have anything to do with financing or any other legislation that would go along with getting a development like this approved. The planned unit development process starts with Planning Commission, and that meeting occurred on November 22nd of 2022. That video is live if you want to see that full presentation and discussion. And in that meeting, the first step was for the planning commissioners to review the site plan as proposed against a series of objectives of what the planned unit development zoning ordinance says should be the objective of a mixed-use development for planned unit development. They unanimously passed that on November 22nd, and then we are moving forward to pursue a public hearing for City Commission. So the Planning Commission, when they review the preliminary plan and approve it, which they have done, then it goes to City Commission, and the rezoning itself goes to City Commission for a public hearing. So City Commission reviews whether the site itself is appropriate for rezoning based on the Planning Commission's recommendation, and that'll be a public hearing. And then on the next step after that would be a final development plan. The timeline is flexible, so if the City Commission approves that rezoning, then the development team has 18 months to bring a final development plan to Planning Commission. And that final development plan is much more robust and detailed than the first plan. So what we have now is a preliminary site plan. The final development plan cannot sway from that preliminary plan with any significance, so they can't suddenly be moving big parts of the development around. They can't shrink the park space. They can't do anything big, any big changes. They have to follow what their preliminary site plan says. What they do is get more detailed. So they get more detailed about the architecture. They get more detailed about the landscaping. We have a condition in the Planning Commission approval that they square away the precise amount of public space, who's managing it, what the ownership is, and all of those sort of details too, before they take it to Planning Commission for final development plan approval.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
question. What is the timeline? Has the public hearing been set with the town or with the City Commission?
There was a public hearing set for this coming Monday, January 9th. We do expect that to be rescheduled for March.
And so let me, just so I understand, if the PUD is approved, that locks that development into those footprints, correct?
Once the final development plan is approved, yes. It's like we're approving them to create construction drawings and build it as approved.
So one of the benefits is the developer gets a little bit more freedom, leeway in the layout, but the city gets assurance that what's approved is what's approved, and you can't go back unless you start the process all over again, correct?
Correct. So with a planned unit development, the city has much more control about how it's laid out, how much green space there is, what uses are in it, and to ensure that has really high quality streetscapes. So from the site planning perspective, it can be a really successful development. We can make sure that it's high quality architecture. Whereas in a typical site planning process, you don't have that we don't have any architectural review in the city of Sandusky. So with a site plan process, a typical site plan process, they can draw a rectangle and tell us what that's going to be, and they could draw a picture and tell us what it's going to look like, but we have nothing to hold them accountable to build what that picture looks like. In a planned unit development process, we have the layer of the design guidelines that they're going to submit as part of the final development plan.
The review process is much more rigorous in the PUD.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So out in the unincorporated areas of the county, we recommend to the townships that they use the PUD quite a bit. Just for what Aaron said, the benefit is that there's a little bit more flexibility. You're not, it's not just cookie cutter for the developer. They get a little bit more flexibility, but then the township gets that project locked in. That footprint cannot change. Can't make any major changes without going back through the process again.
Okay.
That's been my experience too in the past. It's much more constructive rather than destructive. You know what you have to do, you know the parameters of your plan, and you just go.
So if you would rezone a piece of property, any piece of property, doesn't have to be this property, if you rezone it C1, just like Aaron said, you don't know what you're going to get. You could get a Dollar General, or you could get, any of the other approved uses within the C1 district. And they're, other than your site plan approval, there's no guarantees of what you're going to get with the PUD. You're locked in.
Okay. So much more accountability built into the
Yes.
plan from the get-go. Okay. All right, thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. All right. Anything else on the battery park? Any questions from any other members of the committee?
You mentioned it was scheduled for review by the city commission on the 9th of January. It's now been moved to March. Do you have a date for that, so I can put that in the minutes too?
So the public hearing was set for January 9th. That's not going to be on the agenda for city commission. It's my understanding that they have to make a motion to set that, so that date isn't set until they make a motion to set it. My expectation is that it will be set for March 13th, but that's not final, if you could reflect that in the minutes. And that can be referred to, the January 9th meeting will be live on YouTube, and anybody that's interested in that meeting date should listen to
That's the tentative date.
the tentative date would be March 13th.
Okay,
yes.
thanks.
All right. Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you. Any other new business that anyone has to bring? Okay, we'll move on to old business, Justice Center. Mr. Klein.
Yes, sir. So that project's moving right along as anticipated, except for one minor item that we had where we did encounter, just like every project, something that you don't know is there, that the contractor underestimated the timeline to remove all the asbestos. So there is a slight delay on it, but it's not like it's going to be a year or anything. It might be some weeks or a month or so. But everything's moving right along. The contractor's moving through with phase one, and we're still anticipating midsummer of this year being complete with phase one and moving over to phase two. They do have construction fence up around the site, but that they have made sure that they did not eliminate the access to Battery Park or the sailing club along what I'm calling the eastern end of the building, so over by the skate park there. They still have access from Washington through that back parking lot. I think it's very clear where the public has been delineated as to where they should be parking, and that front access for the public, where they've been going for years to the court, will remain open through phase one and phase two. So they'll still park in the normal parking lot, and they'll still access the building from the front. One thing that I will add, it's not very clear out there, but there is on-street parking on Meggs, so we haven't had any issue with parking on site so far. But if people do need to get access during construction, they can park on Meggs and walk in the building that way. So.
All right. Any questions for Mr. Klein on the Justice Center? Okay, we'll move on. Sandusky Bay Pathway.
Yes, that project is still moving forward with the acquisition phase. As this group is aware, we do have the East Water Street portion of the project that was broken out from the remainder of the Sandusky Bay Pathway. And the pathway, what we're technically calling the Sandusky Bay Pathway project, encompassed design from Venice Road up Edgewater and connecting to the existing path where it currently terminates kind of on the west end of downtown, just past Amvet's Field. And then First Street and connecting that to Meggs. Those are the remaining pieces that we haven't gotten through final design, and that's what really is encompassed within this Sandusky Bay Pathway project. We're still moving forward with acquisition. That hasn't changed. The landing, which is the next item on the agenda, was the one that we were focusing on the acquisition. We finally got our final piece of easement for that one. So now our consultant is turning all of their focus onto the other portions and sections of the pathway. We're still working with the property owners, and unfortunately, or whatever, we're still working with the railroad and trying to see if they'll be flexible in any way possible, but they're still the railroad, no matter how you slice it. So,
You're talking on the west end?
yes, on Edgewater and on Monroe.
Okay.
And there's a parcel that we need to acquire from them on First Street that was old, piece of railroad that may not have ever been transferred, and we're still trying to figure out the records of that. So those are the three areas that we're trying to deal with them.
Okay.
And that process, what I'm told, could take upwards of a year or two. But my plan with the pathway and with the landing is still to complete a section of it, at least one section per year, as we move forward, and hopefully complete it in as short a time frame as possible.
Okay. And the Route 6 project encompasses a couple of those items, correct? And what's the timeline for that at
Yeah,
this point?
so on the next one, the landing, that project is the Route 6 that ODOT was successful in getting the funding for, with the help of regional planning. And that project took the landing and really split the landing into two projects. The first one that will be going will be the path that crosses Heminger Ditch, and then the actual park project north of the sports center that would be on the waterfront. We're still are going through the environmental phases on that. We have about 5 to 7 permits that we need to submit. Those were all completed back in 19, and we were planning on submitting in 20 until we had to put it on hold. Now we have to redo all of those because they've expired. So we're hoping to get all those in 23. And I'm going to bid that project as soon as we have everything in hand, whether that's 23 or 24 or whenever that is. I'm going to hopefully bid that project as soon as we get everything finalized. The other portion would be west of Heminger Ditch to Cedar Point Drive. That is the piece that got just over $7.5 million of funding from that grant that was received by ODOT. ODOT's running that project, and then that grant also included, from Federal Highway, included the pathway and several roundabouts between the city of Sandusky, Corp Limit, and then all the way to Huron as well. So that would continue the pathway on the north side, including several roundabouts that would be installed at difficult intersections or dangerous intersections. The portion that's within the city that I can speak on, we did acquire our final piece of easement, so we are now set with exactly where the path can go. So whether we wait 50 years or 4 weeks, we can get started on knowing exactly what's going to happen. So we have a route, which is something that we've always struggled with in the past, even since the early 2000s, is when we had a route, we didn't always get the property to build on that route. Well, now we have the property, so that's locked in where we can build, and we can make sure that this path happens. So that one is going through final design. Because we have ODOT funds, we have additional requirements that we have to do. So the consultant now is analyzing what additional requirements are needed. And unfortunately for us, as part of that process, ODOT brought the environmental piece in-house, which means that we're subject to their timeline. They're going to reevaluate all of our environmentals and then submit the permits and get everything that's needed for that phase of the project. Good part is we kept it west of Heminger because the environmentals on that part are very, very, very limited. North, obviously, of the sports center, there's a lot more environmental that's needed in that area. So that project we have to complete before ODOT starts their construction, which would tie in from the current drive access, the western drive access to the sports center, and continue easterly. So we need to complete our boardwalk and complete everything so that they have a contiguous pathway all the way to Cedar Point Drive.
Okay.
And they're scheduled, I think, I don't recall the meeting yesterday, might be 2026-ish. I'm not sure if that's calendar year or fiscal year, but it's far enough away that I'm not sure it really matters.
The contract will let spring of '26.
Thank you. All right, very good. Any questions on, I guess we would cover the pathway and the landing on that report. Very comprehensive, thank you.
Through the chair, I was going to
Yes,
ask on Edgewater, has that been secured for the pathway from Venice Road to basically around Monroe Street up Edgewater?
Through the chair,
Yes.
there are really two property owners and the railroad that we're dealing with. I think we've come to final, really almost final terms. We're about 95% there. We wanted to make sure that we helped Toffs out with making sure that there was good connection and we didn't interfere with their traffic. Also with US Subaki, we wanted to make sure that we didn't affect their truck traffic. And I think the last piece, and we talked about it yesterday with the consultant, was just making sure that in lieu of the requested guardrail, we just put in bollards because that's more acceptable to ODOT and more acceptable it's still a safety, it's still going to provide what's needed, but it's just changing that. And once we get approval for that, I think we're going to be able to move forward.
Okay.
And both of those property owners so far have told us that they're willing to donate.
Great.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you, Mark. Any other questions? All right. Causeway Wetlands.
Yeah, so that project the city's portion of it was completed in the fall, and we worked with the Corps of Engineers and ODNR and Ohio EPA and everybody else that Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and everybody that was involved with the placement of the dredged material when the Corps of Engineers dredged the Mosley Channel. That dredging and the placement took place without incident. There was a lot of publicity, I think, that came around that project as well. There were visits from senators and you know, they were really impressed with it, and everybody wanted to move forward with a second phase. There's additional funding remaining on the current grant that was received, just over $4 million grant that was received several years ago. There's still funding available. We're looking at moving forward with site selection and construction documents for a second phase. We don't know exactly where that second phase will go. It could be an expansion of this current one. Whether that expansion is south or west or whatever, we're not entirely sure. Or it could be somewhere completely different. Our Sandusky Bay initiative did show another site being just north of the railroad tracks on Venice, off of Venice Road, those railroad tracks there that are kind of west of the Subaki ball diamond there. It did show another wetlands possibly being in that location. And remember, all of this is required based on the state of Ohio passing a law that you could not open lake dispose of the dredge material. So in order to dredge that channel, there's a need for a location to beneficially reuse those dredgings. And that's why in November, the Corps of Engineers actually came here to present, and the new member from the Corps who it seems like he's taking a lot more active approach than what I've had in the past, and the federal government has changed their practice to say that they no longer have, in the past they didn't have to agree formally with the open lake disposal ban in Lake Erie. They did change that over the last year, where now they are going to make sure that they're participating in figuring out a way to handle the dredge material in a beneficial manner. So it's nice that they're on board with us and that they're pushing forward and moving forward along the same path, rather than being somewhat of a hurdle in the process. So when we move forward with the second one, we do have capacity in the first project for another round of dredging late next year. We figure that's probably going to be a fall dredging project again. And then we'll need something in place probably for the next dredging cycle, which would be maybe in 24 or 25 when they decide to do the Mosley Channel again. So we need to have something constructed and in place for that 2 years out. And I do want to remind everybody, what's out there now is not the final product. That is just a place for the material to dewater. We're going to keep monitoring. We have monthly monitoring going on that project through volunteers. So that's not the final product. We're also going to design the final product as the second phase.
Okay. Quite a bit going on out there.
There's a lot.
Yep. And it's interesting to see that the Corps is being proactive for once. Yes, sir.
When you talk about final product, what do you have in mind as the final product?
Yeah. Through the chair, the final product is intended to be covering many things. As we know, the nutrient loadings have caused the algal blooms in Sandusky Bay. It's been mostly nitrogen, but the nitrogen and phosphorus have caused the problem. So what the goal is, and what a lot of the funding is going for, is reducing nutrient loadings floating back and forth and throughout the bay. So as part of that, we're also intending to create habitat for fish and birds and other wildlife with native plant species, spawning areas, those types of things that can help promote not only fishing and economic development and access and those types of things for paddle sports, but also for the wildlife that needs these types of things. One of the positives that we've already found through the Fish and Wildlife Department of ODNR was that there has already been a big increase in fish species in quantity in the area along the shoreline there. Not exactly sure why, but hopefully that continues.
It's interesting. All right.
Again.
Any other questions on the wetlands? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to the US EPA Brownfields Assessment Grant.
I have an update from our community development team on that. So just to back up and set a little intro, the city of Sandusky was awarded a $500,000 brownfields assessment grant from the US EPA. So that's what is the agenda item is referring to.
Okay.
That project period started October of 2022 and it goes all the way through the end of September in 2025. So we have quite a bit of time to utilize that grant. A request for proposals was released in the fall of 2022 to identify consultants for the program, and 8 responses were received. Those were scored by a 3-person team of city staff, and 2 firms have been recommended by that selection team, and they're communicating with each of those on the scope of work. So after the proposal, you go through and say, hey, we like your proposal, let's work on a scope of work. And they're expecting that that group of staff members to request commission approval for professional service agreements with each of those firms by the end of February. So you should see an update on that coming up soon.
So just for clarification, what will the consultants provide to us, to the city? Are they looking for sites, or are sites been identified?
My understanding is that sites have not been identified yet, and that's part of the scope of what they're working on, but this is not my project, so that's the extent. I was like, hey, I need an update for the committee, help me out.
All right, I'll try not to ask any more detailed questions then. All right, so more details to come. All right.
If you don't mind.
No, yes, please, Aaron.
In the proposal, and I'm not overseeing this project at this time, but I have in the past been involved in brownfields, but the proposal usually identifies suggested sites, but it doesn't necessarily say that these are the sites we're moving forward with. You have to have a property owner that's willing to work with you, unless it's obviously the city-owned property. But as you move forward, you will present sites to the consultant. And one of the good things that community development is doing is they have two consultants on board. So there's always you can get a price from them, and you can continue to get good pricing and keep them both honest rather than them just gouging you. So once you get a site, you can present it to both of them, and then they can do a phase one. And if a phase two is needed, and if a remedial action plan is needed, it's really a really good economic development tool for the city for first dollars into a project where somebody is looking to buy a piece of property for a development. So that's what the intent of this is. It's not cleanup.
All right, that's what I was going to
It's actually just for the assessment up front.
All right, identify and assess. Yes.
I was going to ask, is the consultants, have they been identified that we would know what companies they are that we're looking with or working with?
There was a scoring process that was done, and there are two consultants that they're working out those contracts now. And I believe we should have an update on if we can work out agreements with both of them at the next meeting in February. We should have a good update by then on exactly if those agreements were able to be finalized, or scopes of work are actually able to be finalized. A lot of times it's hard to say these are the two, although we do rank them and go through the whole process and send out the letters as here's who's selected. You don't want to commit to them until you actually have an agreement and scope of work and cost finalized. One of them I know we worked with in the past, which is Manick and Smith Group, and I can't remember who the other one was, but we should be able to let you know if those contracts are good.
One of them Partners? Does that ring a bell for you?
I do not believe Partners. Colleen's running this.
The second is Terracon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Good. Any other questions on that brownfield grant? All right. Any? Yes, sir.
I did have one other project that I wanted to make sure I updated you on, and I apologize that I didn't have it on the list, if that's okay.
That's fine.
The Mill Street High Rate Treatment Project, which was a project we had at the wastewater treatment plant. We talked about this kind of from a very high level in the past. This is a overflow reduction project that is mandated by EPA as part of our general plan. In that project, we did get bids late December, right like the day before we went on break for the holiday, and they came in right at the engineer's estimate of $33 million. The plan is to divert 16 million gallons per day of wet weather flow from an existing overflow at the mills, at the north end of Mill Street, to the treatment plant to go through the treatment process before it gets discharged back into the lake. The hope is obviously to help clean up and water quality within the lake, but also every time we do one of these projects, we always have basement flooding and other issues like that in mind to try to help reduce the basement flooding as well, or any issues in the system. A lot of these projects, being that this is at the treatment plant, a lot of these projects set up other projects throughout the system that can help reduce those overflows as well. So this is the last project by our general permit, but we do expect to go to commission on Monday to award that project for just over $33 million.
Okay. Any questions on that project from the committee? Okay. Any other old business that anyone has? All right, seeing none, we have a number of members of the community here today. It's good to see interest in what we're doing. Anybody from the community have any input that they wanted to provide?
Come to the podium.
Tim?
It's good to be here.
Good to see you, Tim.
Tim. Representing Save Our Shoreline Parks. It's probably last week, I think it was, maybe before the first of the year, I sent out an email to the city manager asking for the minutes to be updated from this committee. It's been like 4 or 5 months that they haven't been updated. So I would suggest that now that, I think we have an administrative assistant for this committee, right?
Yeah, Quinn.
Okay. That maybe instead of looking for minutes on somebody's desk or somewhere, that we just go back and watch the videos, and maybe she could do the minutes to catch that up?
Well, actually, Tim, we're working that in the committee, but thank you. We know we can fall back on that if we need to.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I don't know if this committee has actually seen the preliminary plans for the planned unit development on Battery Park. Have you guys seen that yet through the Planning Commission?
Not officially, but I have seen some of the plans.
It hasn't been officially presented to this committee yet.
Okay. I guess I was here for that Planning Commission meeting, and I'm a little bit concerned that as of right now, the plan that we have right now is that some of the numbers don't add up as far as park area. The portion of the park, Battery Park, that's being leased out to Maroos Brothers is 12 acres. And Maroos is claiming that there's going to be 9 acres of park, which leaves 3 acres of land for hotel, condos, retail, parking garages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as the plans come forward, detailed plans, maybe those figures will change. I hope so, because they're not adding up right now as the initial plan. I'm also going to sort of disagree with Ms. Blair that the bicentennial plan, and also, if you guys remember this, the Trust for Public Lands plan, both those plans pretty much show that the current park area of Battery Park would not be impacted by this development. If you do get a chance to look at the plans for the Maroos plan, is Battery Park is being squeezed into the northwest corner closer to the sailing club. So again,
I believe that would be northeast corner, Tim.
Northeast.
I'm sorry, northeast. My bad.
Yeah.
Northeast. One thing that was not, and we couldn't hear it back there at least, the public hearing scheduled for this coming Monday is maybe going to be moved to March. The question I have, is there a reason for that? Does it have anything to do with the charter amendment? I'm kind of assuming that's why it's being moved, but we don't know for sure.
That's not part of our,
We would not be-
that's not part of this committee.
Oh, but
City Commission.
We don't have input on that, Tim.
Yeah, Carl, it was brought up here. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, we don't have any input on that or
I was
control
hoping
of
maybe the
that.
law director's here today. I was hoping he might be able to answer that question.
Yeah.
On a different topic, the Jackson Street Pier. I was watching the video before I came here, and again, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but the pier is being closed. Sometimes up to 4 days. Thursday for setup, closed Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I have it on video on my phone when that pier was opened. I have a video from the former city manager when they opened it up, and he gave a visual tour. He stated that the pier would not be closed during events, that they purposely constructed that pier so that when there's events, that I can still take my 87-year-old mother out to the end of the pier and enjoy the waterfront. So, there's nothing you guys can do about it, but I just want to make you aware of the fact that, again, the public was not, they were told one thing, but something different ended up happening at the end. We're being charged for events. I'll name the events. The festive sale last year, for the first time ever, they closed the entire pier, charged anywhere from $19 to $33 to get on the pier. Sight lines continue to be an issue, but again, you guys can't fix that. I'm going to bring up Sabaki because Aaron brought up the fact that they're looking at that area for artificial wetlands. I would encourage this committee to consider the Subaki property, which is the ball diamond and up to the shoreline. Consider that as a potential spot for a beach if the Lions Park Beach idea falls through. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate your input. Any other members have any questions or input?
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Craig McCloskey. I'm a Sandusky resident. I'm a fifth generation.
Could you spell your last name, please?
It's McCloskey.
Thank you.
Like I was stating, I'm a fifth generation Sandusky resident. My family literally started in Lions Park and on Meg Street at the 225 house there. My great grandparents lived and died on Meg Street. We all went to the parks when we were kids. My grandfather helped build the houses and then lived, and my father was born in the houses on Lion Park. So we put together this pack when we realized they were going to start building on Battery Park. We took and did commission meetings. We did flyers. We went and sat with the public on a lot of different things, and we took petitions. And we did everything by the book. We did everything on time when we were supposed to. We've turned in well more than petitions that were required by the Board of Elections for an actual vote on the parks. I represent the people of Sandusky that can't afford condos and can't afford high-end shopping on Battery Park, but they can afford to go and visit a park. There's a lot of people that want to keep it a public park. Put some money into it, fix it up. Don't let it become another high development area for rich people to enjoy that the rest of the city that pays the taxes in this place cannot afford to go to. Another thing, basically, why is the city commission so dead set on letting us vote what happens to this park? What deals have been made? Where money has been spent? Why? A lot of the people we talk to, those are the questions. If you change the zoning, then the park never stays a park. Once it's built on, once one shovel digs it up and puts a building on it, it's never a park again. You can't take it back once it's built. And that's just the general consensus of the people we talk to. We have people on our website flooding us with questions all the time. These are the things I want you people to know that are in charge of what happens in our city. I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other? Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Charles Wenger, and I'm a recent...
Last name, please.
Wenger.
Thank you.
And I'm a recent immigrant to the Cove District, and I like to say hi to everybody.
Hello.
And I got a few concerns, and I'm sorry I'm late to the game. I've just recently moved up, and about the Battery Park development. And my first concern, are there any restrictions on the transient rentals at the proposed Battery Park development? The second one is, are there going to be any restrictions on converting condos to apartments or apartments to condos? And I guess my third concern would be the actual scope and nature of the access to the water. Is it at some future point, 10 years from now, can whoever is the proprietor of the Battery Park decide to put in fencing along the water line? I mean, when, right now they can maybe walk up, drop a fishing line, or, put their feet in the water. Is it going to be some point they're going to put up a privacy fence that's 10 feet tall and put locks at the gates? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name's Tyler Franklin. I'm a resident of 1117 Marlborough Street, voter there, and I want to just talk really quickly about this charter amendment on your new business. Item number 3, I'm sure I'll end up on Facebook somewhere. But, I just want to first say that this group proposing this, as you consider your role overseeing what goes on in the Bayfront, and especially with this battery park development, it's crazy to me that this group who is talking about taxpayer rights, knowing what goes on, where our taxpayer dollars are going to these parks, is okay supporting a one-issue election that us taxpayers in this community are going to be funding, one issue. So I have a problem with that. And if you look at the amendment itself, when you're talking about citizens' approval for parks, this committee becomes almost obsolete, right? Because now it's just the citizens. I mean, this is America. We elect people to make these decisions, and when they make those decisions, they make them. And we have every 2 years, we have the opportunity to elect new people and change the course of the direction, right? So we've made this direction. We have this direction. I don't understand why we would fund this election on one issue. And what makes me really angry is I spent 4 years as president of my class at Sandusky High School, and I have classmates that still live in this community. Young people who have invested in their future in this community and are going to call this place home, and I don't understand how this would help them at all. I mean, I don't understand how the development of Battery Park, where you hear about, sitting here in this meeting, I hear planned unit development, the amount of oversight in each step going forward in this Battery Park plan, the amount of assurances the public have, the fact that Maroos can't put fences up on the property, 40-foot boardwalks around the whole property, and you have this included in this plan. I don't understand where the concern is there, right? And if you look at the broader scale, how all of this is tied together, you want to talk about the future of Sandusky, the economic future of Sandusky, the future of our Bayfront. I don't understand how a company who's looking at moving a manufacturing center somewhere is going to look at, let's go to KBI where we'd rather have, a hunk of asphalt on our waterfront than a beautiful center of economic density. I just really don't understand it. So I think as we go forward, at the end of the day, as this committee considers how it's going to use its gravity and weight in terms of this charter amendment in the coming month, I'd first of all advise you and ask that you don't support it because your role becomes obsolete. And furthermore, to just consider the legal mess that this could create. A charter amendment where it's citizens' approval for government. What is private development of a park? What is development of a park? We knock down a tree, we're going to need citizen approval. It's like saying I want $100 every day, so I need to go change the Constitution. It's impractical. We have things set up so that this works. And I hope that this committee, as you go forward, realizes that the Bayfront is strong, the Bayfront's safe, that Battery Park is an excellent project for this, and that this charter amendment has really nothing to do with the parks, right? It's about other things, but I just urge you to, for the people who believe in Sandusky, for the people who invest in Sandusky, for the people who live here, and for the people who want to make a fair living in Sandusky, that you do not support this charter amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. Okay. Anyone else in the community for community input? Again, it's good to see people interested and give their opinions to us, and we appreciate it. Appreciate the time you've taken. Any other items to come before the committee this morning? If not,
Move to adjourn.
Second.
thank you. We're adjourned.